What if the story behind GLP-1 drugs isn't the miracle you've been told, but a hidden cost no one dares to discuss?
Across the United States, the names have become unavoidable: Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. They dominate television ads, TikTok trends, celebrity interviews, even late-night comedy skits. For millions, these drugs are sold as nothing less than revolutionary. The silver bullet, not only for diabetes, but also for weight loss, for longevity, for a better life. Doctors repeat the same phrase: GLP-1 drugs are safe, effective, and your best hope. The media amplifies it, filling headlines with glowing success stories. And pharmaceutical companies? They sit back and watch billions of dollars flood in, an avalanche of profit unlike anything the diabetes industry has seen in decades. But here's the unsettling truth. Whenever a drug is marketed as a miracle, history tells us to stop and look closer. Because the louder the promise, the deeper the silence about what isn't being said. So what exactly are GLP-1 drugs? In simple terms, they are a class of medications that mimic a hormone in your body called glucagon-like peptide 1. This hormone helps regulate blood sugar and appetite. Sounds harmless, right? On the surface, it makes perfect sense. If the hormone helps, why not give the body more of it? But medicine, real medicine, is never that simple. Because when you begin tampering with hormones, you're not just flipping a switch. You're tinkering with a complex system evolved over millions of years, a system where one change can ripple into dozens of unexpected consequences. And that's exactly what we're starting to see. For every glowing headline about celebrities shedding pounds, there are whispers buried in medical reports about side effects. Nausea that doesn't stop. Muscle loss so severe that patients feel weaker than before. Gut problems that linger for months. Psychological effects no one expected. The official narrative? These are minor, manageable issues. The buried reality? Some of these effects don't fade, some worsen with time. And some are only beginning to appear as long-term data slowly emerges. Think about it. GLP-1 drugs are being pushed at a scale we've never seen before, yet they are still relatively new. Which means no one truly knows what 10 years, 15 years, or a lifetime of using them will do to the human body. Does that sound like a miracle? Or does it sound like an experiment being conducted in real time with millions of unsuspecting volunteers? And the financial side is no less disturbing. GLP-1 drugs are among the most expensive on the market, costing thousands per year, sometimes thousands per month. That's not a cure. That's a subscription. A subscription paid not with convenience, but with dependency. Once you start, stopping becomes nearly impossible. Patients who discontinue often see weight return rapidly, blood sugar rise, and symptoms rebound with vengeance. If you were running a pharmaceutical company, could you design a better business model than this? A product so addictive, not chemically but physiologically and psychologically, that the customer can never walk away. And yet, beyond the profits and promises, there is a silence. Because scattered throughout the medical landscape are anomalies, unexplained findings, reports that don't fit the miracle narrative, early warnings that are either ignored, downplayed, or buried. Doctors who raise concerns often find themselves ridiculed or dismissed. Patients who speak out are told they are outliers, unlucky, or exaggerating. Meanwhile, the advertising machine grows louder, drowning out every whisper with polished slogans and glossy campaigns. But the truth has a way of leaking through cracks, and the cracks are spreading. Because if you look closely, if you're willing to step beyond the headlines and examine the data, the testimonies, the suppressed discussions, you start to see a different story emerge. A story not of miracles, but of trade-offs. A story not of hope without cost, but of a hidden balance few are willing to admit. And perhaps most chilling of all, a story that connects GLP-1 drugs to patterns we've seen before in the pharmaceutical world. Patterns where profit eclipses prudence, where speed to market outruns caution, where the rush to label something a miracle blinds us to its hidden price. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll dig into these cracks, the overlooked data, the forgotten reports, and the testimonies that paint a picture you will not find in mainstream headlines. And once you see what lies beneath the surface, the miracle may never look the same again. If GLP-1 drugs dominate the headlines today, it's only because of what came before them, the discovery of GLP-1 itself. The story begins decades ago when scientists studying the digestive system stumbled upon a hormone with strange and powerful effects. They called it glucagon-like peptide 1. On the surface, GLP-1 didn't look like much, just another small peptide in a sea of thousands the body produces every day. But what it did was remarkable. When GLP-1 levels rose after eating, the body suddenly became more efficient at lowering blood sugar. The pancreas released insulin more effectively. The stomach slowed digestion. Appetite decreased. In other words, GLP-1 helped the body stabilize itself. It was like discovering a hidden lever inside the human system, one that could balance energy, sugar, and appetite all at once. For patients struggling with type 2 diabetes, this was a revelation. Here was a natural mechanism built into the body that could help restore control where chaos had taken over. The promise was undeniable. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Instead of focusing on how to support or restore this natural hormone through safe and sustainable means, pharmaceutical companies saw something else, an opportunity. Why encourage the body to use its own GLP-1 when you could manufacture a synthetic version and sell it at a premium? And so began the age of GLP-1 drugs. Branded as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, these drugs don't fix the problem. They bypass it. They flood the system with artificial GLP-1 analogs, forcing the body to respond. Yes, it lowers blood sugar. Yes, it curbs appetite. But it also chains the patient to an expensive, lifelong regimen. Because here's the catch. The moment you stop taking them, the benefits vanish. Blood sugar spikes back up. Appetite roars back with a vengeance. Weight returns faster than it left. The body, once dependent, resists returning to balance on its own. That is not a cure. That is dependency disguised as treatment. And the side effects? They are not side notes. Nausea, vomiting, constipation that lingers for weeks. Severe muscle loss, stripping away not just fat, but strength. And in early reports, disturbing cases of stomach paralysis that may never fully heal. Official statements dismiss these as rare or mild, but buried in forums, in small studies, and in patient surveys, another picture appears. For many, the trade-off is brutal. The miracle becomes a daily struggle, exchanged for a lifetime subscription to injections and pills. Meanwhile, the cost continues to rise. These drugs are marketed as essential, but priced as luxuries, thousands of dollars per year, often not fully covered by insurance. A system designed not for liberation, but for profit. And yet, behind this wall of profit, a question remains. If GLP-1 is so powerful, if it truly holds the key to stabilizing blood sugar, reducing appetite, and transforming metabolic health, then why does the answer have to come in the form of expensive drugs with crippling side effects? Why does no one talk about the possibility of supporting the body's own GLP-1, the hormone it naturally produces every single day? The silence is deafening, because scattered across the scientific world in small journals and overlooked reports are clues. Clues that certain foods, certain compounds, certain practices may enhance natural GLP-1 production. Clues that suggest the body doesn't need synthetic substitutes if it's given the right tools. But those studies rarely make headlines, because there is no billion-dollar patent in encouraging the body to do what it was already designed to do. There is only profit in control. And so the world is sold a half-truth, that GLP-1 is a miracle, but only if you buy it in a syringe. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll dig into the scattered evidence, the overlooked studies, the forgotten experiments, and the hidden cultural practices that suggest another path exists. A path that doesn't chain you to dependency, but instead unlocks the body's own ability to fight back. When you look past the headlines and the billion-dollar campaigns, a different picture of GLP-1 begins to emerge. Not in glossy ads, not in mainstream reports, but buried in the corners of research journals, scattered across continents, hidden in plain sight. Because long before GLP-1 drugs hit the market, researchers were asking a different question. Could the body's own GLP-1 be supported naturally, without injections, without lifelong prescriptions? The evidence says yes, but you would never know it. Take a study from the early 2000s, conducted not by pharmaceutical giants but by small, independent teams. They noticed that when participants consumed certain plant compounds, GLP-1 levels spiked. Appetite decreased. Blood sugar stabilized, not from a drug, not from a needle, but from compounds found in everyday foods. Another report, quietly published in an Asian medical journal, described something even more striking. In regions of Japan where traditional diets rich in bitter and fermented foods were common, type 2 diabetes rates remained unusually low, despite rising obesity. When scientists dug deeper, they found these foods seemed to naturally boost GLP-1 activity. Coincidence? or a cultural key that modern science ignores. And it wasn't just Japan. Mediterranean populations consuming high amounts of polyphenols, compounds from olives, herbs, and certain teas, showed similar patterns. Their GLP-1 response was stronger, their insulin sensitivity higher, their risk of diabetes lower. But here's the catch: these findings rarely reached the front page. They were published, yes, but quickly forgotten, dismissed as inconclusive, or overshadowed by the shiny promise of drugs. Why? Because you can't patent a bitter herb. You can't trademark a traditional recipe. You can't turn a centuries-old practice into a billion-dollar subscription. And so the narrative shifted. GLP-1 became synonymous with syringes and pills, while the natural pathways were brushed aside, buried in archives, left unread. Yet the clues remained. In one trial, patients who consumed a particular compound derived from citrus peels showed marked improvement in GLP-1 secretion. In another, extracts from humble vegetables increased the hormone's presence in the gut. These aren't miracles. They're biology. The body already has the machinery. It only needs the right signals to activate it. But here's where things get uncomfortable. When small labs tried to publish their work, funding dried up. When independent researchers presented their findings, invitations to conferences mysteriously disappeared. And when doctors mentioned these possibilities, they were dismissed as fringe voices, unproven, not rigorous, premature. Yet quietly, some patients began experimenting, incorporating foods, herbs, and compounds whispered about in underground forums, shared in obscure blogs, tucked away in books no one bothered to promote, and slowly testimonies surfaced. People claiming better blood sugar control, reduced hunger, steadier energy, not from injections, but from unlocking what was already inside them. It sounds radical, but is it? Or is it simply inconvenient for an industry built on endless dependence? Think about it. If even a fraction of the population could support their GLP-1 naturally, what would happen to the market for drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Would profits shrink? Would demand collapse? Would billions of dollars simply vanish? That is the fear. Not that the science doesn't work, but that it works too well without requiring a prescription. And so the silence continues. You won't see it on the nightly news. You won't hear it from your doctor's lips. But in the shadows of scientific literature, and in the traditions of cultures untouched by modern epidemics, a pattern is visible to anyone willing to look. It's not glamorous. It's not packaged. It's not branded. But it's real. And it may be the single most important piece of the diabetes puzzle that no one wants you to find. In the next part, we'll bring these whispers into the light. You'll see the suppressed reports, the forgotten testimonies, and the overlooked science that connect the dots between ancient practices, modern research, and a pathway that could change everything we've been told about diabetes and weight. If the studies are scattered like puzzle pieces, the stories of real people are the missing links that complete the picture. Because behind every statistic is a human life, a voice that too often goes unheard. Across forums, in archived medical notes, even in the footnotes of clinical trials, there are accounts that don't match the polished narrative of pharmaceutical press releases. Patients who tried GLP-1 drugs and for a while saw results, only to watch their health collapse the moment the injections stopped. One man described it as being on a leash. He lost weight, yes, but the weight came roaring back faster than before when his prescription ran out. His blood sugar spiked to levels even higher than his starting point. His words were chilling. It felt like my body forgot how to function on its own. Others reported more disturbing changes, muscle wasting so rapid they felt weaker each week. A mother of two confessed she could barely lift her toddler without pain. Another described the silent terror of constant nausea that lasted not days but months. Some spoke of stomach paralysis. Their digestion slowed to a crawl, food lingering for hours, leaving them bloated and unable to eat. And yet these voices rarely appear in the official record. When drug companies present data, they highlight averages and broad percentages. The suffering of individuals, dismissed as outliers or rare occurrences, is erased. But if you search carefully, patterns emerge. Patterns that suggest the cost of these drugs is far higher than advertised. And here's where the documents tell an even darker story. Internal memos from regulatory agencies hint at concerns raised years ago, concerns about long-term safety, about dependency, about the lack of exit strategy for patients. Concerns that were quietly downplayed or buried beneath waves of optimistic press. In one leaked document, an independent reviewer questioned whether these drugs were creating what he called a pharmaceutical trap, a cycle where the patient could never escape without paying the price in health or money. His warnings redacted, his conclusions never published in mainstream outlets. Even the clinical trials, if you read beyond the summaries, reveal strange anomalies. Higher dropout rates than reported. Participants complaining of unlisted side effects. Entire groups removed from data tables with vague explanations like non-compliance. What were those patients experiencing? Why were their voices erased? The deeper you dig, the more unsettling it becomes. Because it's not just about what is said, it's about what is left unsaid. The silences, the missing pages, the gaps in the narrative that should alarm anyone paying attention. And still, despite the buried warnings, the industry thrives. Billions in revenue. Endless marketing campaigns promising miracles. Doctors pressured to prescribe. Patients encouraged to inject, without ever being told what happens when the needle is gone. But in the shadows of all this, another thread appears, a quieter one. A thread made of whispers from scientists, from cultural practices, from independent observers who dared to ask, what if the body's own GLP-1 could be supported naturally? What if the so-called trap was never the only way? Those whispers were never amplified. They didn't come with billion-dollar campaigns. They weren't profitable enough to headline. But they exist, and together they form the cracks in the official story. Stay with me, because in the next part we will connect those cracks into something larger. A framework of forgotten science and overlooked practices that point toward a different path. Not the packaged, patented version of GLP-1 you're told to buy, but the original blueprint written inside your own biology. For decades, the story has been controlled. GLP-1 means drugs, syringes, prescriptions, lifelong dependency. But hidden in the overlooked margins of science is another story, one that doesn't make the headlines but refuses to disappear. Because scattered across cultures and small laboratories are fragments of evidence suggesting something almost unthinkable, that the body already knows how to strengthen its own GLP-1 response. That the miracle being sold today was written into our biology long before a pharmaceutical company stamped its logo on it. The clues are everywhere if you know where to look. In rural Asia, doctors studying communities with low rates of type 2 diabetes found something curious. Despite diets that were far from perfect, often high in starches, often lacking modern medicine, these populations showed remarkable stability in blood sugar control. Their secret, a tradition of consuming bitter, fermented foods passed down for generations. When tested in labs, these foods appeared to stimulate GLP-1 secretion naturally. In the Mediterranean, the same pattern emerged. People regularly consuming certain herbs, teas, and oils showed stronger GLP-1 responses. Their digestion slowed in healthy ways, their appetite stayed balanced, their insulin function sharpened. Not magic, not miracle, just biology supported by compounds that nature provided. One forgotten experiment, tucked away in a journal almost no one reads, revealed that simple extracts from citrus peels boosted GLP-1 activity in the gut. Another found that when participants consumed a blend of polyphenols found in common plants, blood sugar levels dropped measurably and appetite decreased. These aren't coincidences. They are clues. Clues that point toward a pathway the world has ignored. But here is where the silence begins to scream. Because if the body can support GLP-1 naturally, if everyday compounds can provide what billion-dollar drugs promise, then the entire market collapses. The profits disappear, the endless prescriptions dry up. So the story's buried, the studies are shelved. The traditions are dismissed as folk wisdom without merit. And patients are told there is no alternative but the syringe. Yet for those who look deeper, the trail is undeniable. Independent researchers who dared to follow it have uncovered patterns too consistent to ignore. They speak of natural signals, found in certain foods, plants, and practices that unlock GLP-1's full potential. Signals that don't require a prescription, don't cost thousands of dollars, and don't chain the body to dependence. But this is not information you will find in glossy magazines or on primetime news. It exists in obscure studies, in reports pushed to the bottom of search results, in testimonies shared quietly online. And once you connect the dots, it becomes clear the miracle is not the drug. The miracle is the body itself. Think about it. If there are cultures where diabetes remains rare, despite the spread of processed food and modern lifestyle diseases, if there are compounds proven in labs to stimulate GLP-1 without pharmaceuticals, if patients are quietly reporting benefits when they experiment with these natural methods, Then what does that say about the story we've been sold? It says the truth is out there, but it's not profitable. And that is why you haven't heard it until now. In the next part, we will follow this trail to its conclusion. We'll explore the suppressed evidence in full, the testimonies ignored, and the hidden blueprint for supporting GLP-1 naturally. What you'll see may change the way you think not just about diabetes, but about the entire system built around it. Because once you glimpse the truth, there's no going back. So here we are. We've followed the trail from scattered studies through suppressed reports into forgotten traditions and overlooked evidence. And the picture that emerges is undeniable. GLP-1 is not a miracle invented by drug companies. It is a miracle written into your body. The only difference is this. While your biology already holds the key, the system has convinced you that only a syringe can unlock it. But the truth? There are signals hidden in plain sight that activate GLP-1 naturally. Signals found in foods, herbs, and compounds that cultures have used for centuries without ever calling it science. Signals tested in small labs buried in obscure journals, quietly confirming what tradition already knew. The body is capable of defending itself when given the right tools. You've seen how the drugs work. You've heard the testimonies of dependency, the buried reports of side effects, the stories of lives chained to endless prescriptions. And now you know there is another way, one that was never meant to reach you. Because if too many people learned how to support their GLP-1 naturally, the billion-dollar profits would collapse overnight. The dependency would end. The leash would break. And that's why the silence has been so loud. That's why this information is so hard to find. Not because it isn't real, but because it is too real, too disruptive, too dangerous to the system, which brings us to now. For those who are ready to see the suppressed evidence for themselves, the documents, the studies, the testimonies, and discover the details of the natural blueprint that has been hidden for decades. We've made it available, but it won't be here forever. The video linked in the description below contains everything we could not say here. The full investigation, the complete trail, the natural pathway to supporting your own GLP-1 without being chained to injections. It is a private resource, and as long as it remains online, you have the chance to see it. But once it spreads too far, history shows us what happens. Videos vanish, links disappear, voices are silenced. So if you're watching this now, consider it rare. Don't wait. Don't let the moment slip away. Click the link in the description to see the suppressed truth. See the evidence. See the blueprint. And decide for yourself. And while you're here, remember, this isn't the only story hidden in plain sight. We are uncovering more about diabetes, about chronic illness, about the quiet forces shaping health and disease behind the scenes. If you want to keep seeing what others won't show you, subscribe now. Because what's coming next may be even more disturbing than what you've seen today. The truth is never easy, but it is always worth finding. Follow the trail, open the file, and uncover the secret that was never meant to reach you.